In today's webinar, we're going to give you a brief history of ProdPad. I'm sure Janna will do that for us, having been here obviously since the very start. We're also going to explain a bit about why ProdPad is something that maybe you should be talking to your clients about and why they should be considering using it, and also why it's something that you might want to share with the rest of your network. As we go through the webinar today, Janna's going to give us a demo of ProdPad, and we'll focus on the key features that we think are most useful and that you'll want to show your clients, along with the problems that they solve for. We'll also try and show you a little bit of real data and real life feel for how people are using ProdPad in the wild. And of course, we'll give you a bit more of an insight into the partner programming, explain how you can join it if you haven't already. And of course, at the end, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A and a bit of a chat if we fancy it. So let's kind of move on. If you're ready, Janna, yeah. We'll talk a bit about the background. Where did it all begin?
Yep, and just a little quick thing on the Q&A. For anybody who isn't familiar with using Zoom webinars, which, I mean, we're 18 months into a pandemic, I'm sure we figured this all out now, but there is either the chat that you can use, or if you want to keep it nice and organized, there's the Q&A panel at the bottom. So drop your questions into there, and myself and Liz will be able to pick them up and answer as we go. Cool? All right, great. So where did it all begin? So myself and my co-founder, Simon, we were both product managers. We were heading up product at a couple different startups in London and needed tools to do our own job. And these things just didn't exist. And so I'd had this idea for a tool to do product management for a while. And it wasn't until I really showed it to a fellow product manager and, that started giving it some life, some air. And so we started as originally a hack project, something we did on the weekends and evenings, but it was something to help us we need something to help us figure out what to do this big backlog of ideas that we had, all the insights, all the experiments, all the feedback we were hearing from our customers and our team, how to map it out onto a roadmap so that we could communicate with our customers and with our team and to everybody else to show, how we were going to hit our objectives and, build towards the vision that we were saying that we were going to build towards, and generally just keep us organized as a product team. And again, nothing really existed. So we started building it and used it internally only for the first couple of years. We kept it really on the down low. It didn't even have a name. It wasn't called ProdPad. It was just this tool that we used within its own internal domain. And then after a couple of years, we realized that this thing that we had was actually really valuable. Our team was succeeding and we were getting a lot of value out of it. So we started sharing it with the product people around us and it grew from there. Really when we kicked off to go build this as a SaaS tool, the tool that you see today, what we wanted to do was build a tool that would help teams forge better product management practices, because we'd come from teams that had just really bad product management practices. And, from everything we learned, both myself and my co-founder were founders of Mind the Product. We'd been learning a lot about some of the best practices. We wanted to bake that into the processes and into the tools that we were using. And so ProdPad became a vehicle for doing so.
Well, that's fantastic. And obviously so many years later, when was that ProdPad first started?
So I like to say that as a product, it started in 2010. But as an actual company, it started in 2012. That's when we formed it as a company, and we launched it as a SaaS tool in 2013. So in 2012, you couldn't buy it as a tool. It didn't have an interface for buying it. You couldn't invite your colleagues. You couldn't pay for it or anything like that. But when we launched it in 2012, it picked up immediately. We had our first paying customer within the month, and actually remarkably, that first paying customer is still with us today, both as that original company who was buying ProdPad, as well as the original advocate who was at that company, who has since left that position and has moved on to different jobs, but has taken ProdPad with her to several places. So we find that really remarkable, and I think a testament to how we've seen ProdPad help product managers improve in their roles and help companies.
Yeah, and interestingly, I discovered ProdPad at the very beginning of 2015, so not long after things had really got started. And I'm happy to say that the company where I implemented it, again, they're still using it there. And I often think that the work that I did there as first product manager, putting good practices in place, and putting the tool in place as kind of what's helped them to keep on a level footing in terms of product management ever since. And that was actually the very, very beginning of me thinking actually product management will be really great for consultants who want to make sure that companies are getting the best practices in place. So yeah, and here we are now talking about it a bit more publicly.
Yep.
So with that in mind, why is it that people should really be thinking about using ProdPad? I mean, obviously we've got people on the call today who maybe want to put ProdPad out in front of their customers. So I think it's quite interesting to talk about why ProdPad would help those product people. And really what we find is that ProdPad solves the common problems that are experienced by product managers and their product teams throughout the product life cycle. Certainly we've spoken to so many product people over the years, we do see the same things cropping up again and again, and ProdPad helps to manage those things. So first of all, let's think about discovery. There's discovery itself is something that's got an awful lot of moving parts. We're collecting feedback from our customers and our users. We're going through the process of ideation and discovery. We're putting together, all of the different things we might do and coming up with a strategy, and we're communicating that strategy. And ProdPad helps with all of those different moving parts. It also helps when it comes to thinking about transparency. So one of the things that we sometimes see is that product management can be a little bit of a black hole, a bit of a kind of black box that people know it happens, but they don't really know what happens in it. But ProdPad really helps to solve that problem. It gives a lot more transparency into the whole process, and it makes sure that everybody in the business can contribute to what all the potential opportunities might be and collaborate around them to define them and communicate them out to the wider world. So ProdPad's definitely something that will help on the transparency side. Now, kind of related to that is the idea of alignment. We want to make sure that as well as everybody knowing what's going on, that they actually use that as a way of making sure they're all pulling in the same direction and that they're aligning around the same goals. And also to help people understand not just what is being done, but what's not being done and why it's not being done. So helping everybody to be aligned and understand what's happening, but also why, is a key part of what ProdPad does. Now, one of the other really great things that we've heard from our customers about the benefits that ProdPad's had for them is around standardization. We speak to customers all the time, or potential customers all the time, who are using various different spreadsheets, Google Sheets, they've got inboxes, they've got, documents somewhere, and everybody managing their products a little bit differently with a different process. That might work for them as individuals, but across the business and across the organization, that can make life really tough, particularly for the executives, I think, who are wanting to know what's happening and just not sure how to get that information. So ProdPad is something that can help with standardization and help everybody harmonize their processes and the way in which the data they're using is both collected, analyzed and shared, so everyone has the same understanding of what's happening. Now, the way that ProdPad does that is it sort of follows a set of what I would think of as key concepts. I suspect that the people on this call, if they've listened to us before, know that we talk an awful lot about lean. And so the ProdPad as a tool very much encourages lean road mapping. I think that the people here will probably be aware of the idea of this now, next, later roadmap that we use. And the idea that the roadmap is a prototype for a strategy. It's a way of sharing strategy with people so that they have the opportunity to feed back on it and understand how they might want to contribute new ideas to that. Also experimentation around that roadmap, being able to look at the problems to be solved and validate the potential solutions, validate the ideas and iterate on those until those problems are solved, rather than, that kind of more, dare I say, old-fashioned way of planning everything way up front. And then, by the time you actually get to the end and have delivered something, A, it's out of date, and B, it could potentially have failed very expensively. So as a key concept, ProdPad very much supports the idea of lean road mapping. In fact, if we look at this next slide, this is an example of the kind of lean roadmap we might encourage people to use. Very much focused on objectives. Those are those coloured bars there around what are the things that people are trying to achieve at a high level, but also problems that can be solved in order to achieve those goals. Now, another key concept for ProdPad is around collaboration, ensuring that everybody has visibility into what's going on, has access to the data and can contribute their ideas, contribute feedback from customers, and generally get involved in discussing them. So the concept of collaboration is certainly very important in ProdPad, as is the concept of consistency. We want everybody within the business to be following a similar process. In fact, if we move to this next slide, we'll see here's an example of what a workflow in ProdPad might look like. In fact, bit later on, we'll have a look at some even more specific examples of making sure that every idea is going through the same process of maybe design, discovery, development, measuring success, and so on. As we talk about measuring success, another one of ProdPad's key concepts is about being outcome driven. We hear an awful lot now about outcomes over outputs, and we know that certainly product managers are very keen to make sure that the work that they're doing, in fact, not just product managers, anybody in a product team wants to know that the work they're doing is having the right outcomes and helping people. One of the things we hear from our users is that ProdPad can be described as opinionated in a good way, that the structure itself encourages people to think about problems that they're solving and the outcomes that they want to achieve, rather than just that sort of build mentality and just delivering features and not really thinking about how much they've helped. So yes, some kind of key concepts there, some key ideas. These are the kind of benefits I would say that your customers could get from using ProdPad, and hopefully that would also then reflect well on you as consultants and as experts in the way that you talk about product. Now, at this point, Janna, I'd like to hand over to you, if that's okay. And I've talked about the high-level concepts, but there's no substitute for seeing it in action, as it were. So if you could give us a very quick run through and talk through some of those key concepts, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me get my screen switched over here and start sharing the other screen where I've got the demo up and running. And we'll go from there. And again, if anybody has any questions as we go, or any particular areas that they'd like to see, then shoot those into the Q&A section or the chat, and Liz will keep an eye out for those as I do the demo. In the meantime, let's share the screen. And this time we're going to go over here. All right, great, we're up. Cool, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of ProdPad, just the highlights today, but I want to give you an idea as to how this sort of thing all works together. Key thing about ProdPad is that it's not just a tool for the product people, it's a tool that the whole team can use. And that ties into what Liz was talking about with providing this consistency and this transparency, making sure the whole team understands what's going on in the product management process. And it really does stitch together these different key areas that product managers need to have oversight on, you know, from the overarching goals, or what we call objectives or OKRs in ProdPad, through to the ideas that are coming in from other teams, through to the feedback that your customers are asking about. So let's dive in and see see these areas and how they all sort of tie together. So within here, I've got a product portfolio. I've got a lot of different products in here. You can manage as many products within ProdPad as you like, and you can group them into product lines. But I'm going to take a look at an individual product today, just to give you a quick overview. And this individual product can have things like this canvas where you've got a vision, strategy, description, value. Again, it's all about bringing your team, making sure that they're all on board with the same concepts and all understand what the key things about your product are. But I'm going to take you to the objectives and key results section, because this is built directly into ProdPad so that people understand what success looks like for your product and how you're actually measuring that. And you can measure these OKRs at both the product and the portfolio level. And you can break these objectives or these OKRs down into both objectives as well as the key results. So the things that you're doing to actually measure how you're going to reach these measures of success. And for each one of these, you can then grade them. So you can identify as to whether you're on track or behind or feel like you're falling, you're at risk here. And track as to what's actually happening, what's happened in the past with each of these. And what's really unique about the OKRs that live in ProdPad is that they are connected to the roadmap initiatives that you have in ProdPad. So a lot of other OKR tools live as standalone tools. They live over here as opposed to actually tied in with what's actually going on in your roadmap. And what tends to happen with a lot of companies is that they have this problem of OKR drift. They set up their OKRs at the beginning of the quarter in one tool, and then they sort of forget about them because they're off in the other tool, iterating and learning. And this allows you to actually connect the work that you're actually doing back to the key results that you're aiming for. So your roadmaps are connected to your key results, and your key results are connected to your roadmaps, and vice versa, right? So this takes me to the roadmap. And this is the lean roadmap format of the now, next, later. And if you just take this collapsed view, you can see the general gist of this, which is that it allows you to map out the problems that you're looking to solve and the order in which you're looking to solve them. So each of these cards represents a problem or an opportunity or what we call initiatives. And then each one in turn is linked back to the objective that it's meant to solve. And then each one in turn is connected to the individual ideas that could be done in order to solve those problems. And I think of these not necessarily as ideas or features, but much more of as experiments, things that you could try in order to solve these problems. And some of these experiments might be feature-based, but there might be things around, adding features or removing features, or not even feature-based at all. They could be things like changing pricing or packaging or the proposition, all different ways that the team might think about, how might we get together to solve the problems that are being placed in front of us in order to grow our user base or increase engagement or whatever it is that is key to that business to hit its objectives. And really key is how this roadmap allows you to connect what's actually been done to your outcomes. A lot of other roadmap formats encourage the team to just think about what they're going to be building next and how quickly that's meant to be done. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a great roadmap, a great product, sorry. What this format allows you to do is to mark things as completed. So once you've actually finished something, don't delete it, move it to the completed column. And this gives you this new field in here. You get a bit of confetti for doing so. Gives you this new field here where you can tackle the outcome. So in here, you can actually track what happened with each of these initiatives. So you did this to grow your user base. Let's say that user growth is up, that's great. And now I've got this list of everything that's been completed in the last 3 months or previously or even longer ago than that. So this is a really great way for you or your clients to track the success of past initiatives and really prove the ROI of investing in product management. It's not about just launching feature after feature after feature. It's about what you've learned over the time, even if sometimes what you learned is several ways of not doing things. Here's an example of an initiative that didn't work, and you've got a couple ideas that were failed experiments. But instead of this being brushed under the carpet, you've now got this history outlining as to what you learned along the way. So if some new person comes into the company and says, I've got this great idea, we could have a notifications project, this would solve everything. You've got this running history of decision logs, essentially, of everything that's happened over the product, and you end up not making the same mistakes again. So ProdPad gains in value over time as you continuously use it. Now, other thing that you'll see in here is the fact that these ideas have different stages in here. And so these stages are the same ones. You see them here. These stages are completely customizable. You'll see that they go everywhere from new idea through to measuring success and successful. I'm going to show you these stages in our workflow view, because these ideas are basically the list of all the things you could do. And this view helps you figure out where these ideas sit in the grand flow of things. So here are the ideas. And again, these are customizable, but you probably have a few stages of things that happen before development. So, this discovery flow, let's validate or invalidate these ideas before you send them off to dev and spend time building the wrong thing. You'll probably then have some stages that represent what's happening in development. And these are tickets that are actually synced directly with your dev tool. So whether that's, TFS or Azure DevOps or Visual Studio or Jira or Trello or whatever your clients are using, we already play really nice with it. And it gives you this window into what's happening in the development cycle. And then once something is actually done, it doesn't mean it's done. A lot of teams forget about this and they get stuck in this build cycle because they finish building it and then they just go back to the front of the list and they pick up the next thing to build. Well, this gives space and time and permission for the team to spend on checking as to whether there's a beta phase that needs to go through. Do you feature flag things? Is there a press release and launch stage that needs to happen? Contact the customers. And of course, really important things like measure that it was actually successful based on the specs that you'd written up front. And if it was, then say so. And if it wasn't, then mark it as such as well. So you've always got that record. So this is the workflow view. Another great view in here, you've got this list view. You can look at all your ideas in terms of your where they sit in relation to things like find the ideas that have the most feedback from customers or find the ideas that are highest impact, right? But my favorite view of all of these, and this actually goes back to something I used to do with sticky notes and dots on the wall, is map your ideas out by impact and effort. Because in here, you can actually see and visualize your whole roadmap, your whole backlog all at once. So the ideas that are pink are the ones that have been updated recently, and then eventually they fade away to gray over time. And you can quickly see which ideas have not been updated recently. Or you can see which ideas have not very much detail versus the ideas that have lots of detail. So ideas start off as little one-liners, little tiny dots, but then they grow as you add mockups and comments and user stories and functional specs and all sorts of other stuff. So you can see which ideas need more detail. These ideas are like that Post-it note that are stuck to your monitor. These ideas aren't likely to fly in dev, whereas the ones that have more detail are more likely to have more research backing up why they deserve to exist, why they deserve to go on the roadmap. So ProdPad helps flag up where you might need to spend attention on the backlog so that you can actually find the right things that could go on your roadmap. And you can combine these filters. So, let's say on your roadmap, you identify that you want to find some revenue generating ideas. So let's find some revenue generating ideas. Here's some, and perhaps not for everybody, but for a particular persona. And we want to find the ones that are not yet on the roadmap. There we go. So it allows me to just filter down and see from all the things we could put on the roadmap. Let's think about putting maybe these ones here because they're quick wins. The revenue generating from the right type of customer, but they're not yet on the roadmap. So dive in and figure out why that is. I could also dive into an individual idea here and show you around that. So this is where you can gather all the requirements, all the specs, all the details that you might want to capture for any particular idea. And we ask smart questions about these that help your team get involved with it, like what problem are you trying to solve and what would be the outcome or what would be the value if you did solve it? Your team can jump in and have conversations around these things. And if you are using tools like Slack, for example, we have a really tight integration, meaning that your team can have conversations in Slack and those conversations actually get synced with ProdPad. So it allows you to have really tight integrations with tools that your team's already using. Same thing with email, right? You could @mention people and they get notified in the tool of their choice essentially, and they can reply wherever they are. And it makes it really easy to engage with entire teams with ProdPad. Other thing you can do with this is you can flesh it out in as much detail as you need to. So you can see that I've added user stories, we've got some functional specs, we've got some additional notes, some designs, and these can be pulled in from just about any tool that you can imagine, whether it's InVision or Marvel or Sketch or, whatever cool tool that the kids are using these days, it can all be added in here. And you can pull in customer feedback as well, because a habit that I see a lot of teams doing is that they'll end up building something because a bunch of people have asked for it, but they don't actually know who has asked for it anymore or what it is that the customer had the problem with at the time. And so ProdPad helps connect the dots between that by making sure that you are pulling in that information, and so that you've got all the context as to what those problems were while you're writing your stories, while you're writing your functional specs. You've got it all at your fingertips. Last thing that I'll show you here is our friend DotBot. And DotBot pops up throughout ProdPad whenever they find any interesting suggestions for you. And what DotBot is doing is essentially taking a look through your backlog to find matches, ways that they can take the load off you. And so DotBot essentially has found 7 suggestions. It's actually found an idea here that it thinks could be either a related idea or a duplicate. So it's really easy to deduplicate and match ideas up in ProdPad. It's also found feedback that it thinks it could be related as well. And so as you can see, it's done a pretty good job of finding feedback from our backlog that it thinks could be connected here. So I've got 10 pieces in here, but I could actually just link some other feedback in here, and it adds it automatically for me and drops it in here. So it makes it really easy to connect the dots between things. And you'll find DotBot throughout ProdPad. DotBot will help make sure that you don't add duplicates, for example, and DotBot will allow you to find themes within your feedback. It'll help find ideas to match your feedback and feedback to match your ideas and all sorts of stuff. So keep an eye out for some of the intelligent pieces like this that have been added to ProdPad and are continuously being added to ProdPad as we go. So that is a whirlwind tour of ProdPad. As you can see, it's a place to capture feedback from your customers, which is essentially there to back up and strengthen the case for different ideas, which are experiments that could be run in order to solve the problems that live on your roadmap, which are essentially there to help you hit the objectives that you're outlining for the business. And so you can see how it's all sort of tied together into one space. It helps the team become better at product management. Happy to take questions on that, because I'm sure that was a very, very fast tour, and there's so much more that I can dive into, but that's not everything that we have on today's agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so obviously a reminder for folks, if you have got questions, pop them into the chat and we're happy to jump off and answer those. In the meantime, though, while we wait for people to catch up and maybe think about some of their questions, I'd like to take a look back at our slides, if we could, Janna, and maybe show a little bit around some examples of how people might have used ProdPad already.
Yep.
So if we get some slides up, we can show that.
Yep. And we've got that in 3, 2, 1, and you're up.
Okay. So yeah, I just went back through. I mean, obviously we have to be careful not showing too much in the shape of client data without some of their example, without their permission, obviously. But I was able to pull out some of the stuff that people have put publicly, and also to ask in our ProdPad talk community to get some examples from people there. So if we go to the first slide here, one of the things that that ProdPad allows you to do is to publish a roadmap. So if we go and look at the next slide from there, Janna. There we go. Okay, so what we've got here, and there's a link there on the bottom if you do want to go and have a look at it in real life. One of our customers, Enable, has used the publish roadmap feature to show their public version of their roadmap. What I find interesting about this is that they have really focused on the themes, the high level things that they're trying to do. They're obviously trying to boost financial performance, mitigate business risk, increase efficiency, and they've identified specific themes or specific areas that they want to focus on to achieve those. Now, what I love about this is it's not pinning them down to specific solutions or specific things to change or do. It's giving them the freedom to be lean. And so it was great to see that they've taken the functionality in ProdPad, they've used it to create a roadmap that looks like their branding and to put that out there for people to see. Incidentally, you can see our public roadmap on our marketing website as well. So if you go to the ProdPad website, and in the footer there, you'll see there's a link to our roadmap. It's a little bit meta, but it's always worth looking at the ProdPad roadmap of what the ProdPad roadmap is going to be. But yeah, that's a great one. If we look at the next slide as well, this is kind of at the other end of things, a lot more on the discovery side. We do have an option to publish a customer feedback portal, and this customer CMAP has put their portal publicly. They've given people the opportunity to fill in a form that says, you know, who they are and what it is they're trying to achieve and what problem or what feedback or ideas they've got, and they know that their customers can then give them feedback really easy in a really nice low friction way. The other thing that they've done is publish some of the ideas that they're considering. Now, these aren't all of their ideas. You can see they've just got 4 here at the moment, but it's encouraging people to give them feedback on things that I would guess are quite a long way through their discovery process, and they're just trying to really drill down onto some more specific feedback about these areas. Something that's worth pointing out is the way that we put ideas on the feedback portal. Again, from a best practice point of view, you're not seeing votes here. There's no bias coming in here from how many people have voted for a particular feature. And if you go and look at the live version of this, you'll see that when the page is refreshed, those ideas appear in a slightly different order. So again, trying to make sure that there's reduced bias here. So with everything else that, as Janna was showing you throughout ProdPad demo and from what we've seen in the way people are using ProdPad, it's very much about best practices and doing product management in a way that's going to lead to the best possible outcomes. Next couple of slides are very similar, but they're just giving you a high level overview of what a typical workflow might look like for your customer. Now I've taken, this is the workflow we use internally in our own ProdPad, and I've overlaid that with the arrow. I've said learn, build, measure, because that's the order it really is, not build, measure, learn. But you can see that there's a process of discovery, there's a process of building and prototyping and so on. Those few workflow stages that are slightly bolder are the ones that we've synchronized with our development tool. We're using Trello, and then some statuses at the end of that where we talk about, you know, was this successful? Was it a failed experiment? Did we learn anything from this? And of course, any new ideas that come out of that success measuring process will go back into the same workflow. On the next slide, we've got another example of something very similar. This is from a customer who's been with us for quite a long time now, and have done exactly the same thing. They've taken that workflow, they've customized it to fit around their process, and obviously that means that your customers can do that too. They can work with you to build a process that is really great for product management, but have it so that it fits around this learn, build, measure type process, so that they really are thinking about, you know, the effects of what they're doing with their product as it goes forward. So at this point, what I really want to think about now is, for you as consultants, what's the reason that you should, you know, who should you introduce to ProdPad? If you're working with clients now, or you're speaking with people within your network, and want to be able to spread the word about how ProdPad can help them, the kind of people that are going to benefit most from that are the ones who are, as I say here, they're building digital products. They're perhaps hoping to increase transparency and want to sort of standardize across the organization, but they want to do it in a way that means that they can build, measure, learn, that they're going to focus on discovery and on validation, on feedback, in order to make sure that they are being more outcome oriented and building the best products. We always do find, like anything where you're introducing something, is that it does really help if you've got leadership support for having an approach that is product led. And as product management consultants, I imagine that you are going to be speaking to customers who are in that kind of position already. Otherwise, I would think they're probably not speaking to you in the first place. That's what I would hope. It does mean as well that we're able to, or ProdPad is able to help you to help them build the best feedback processes and make sure they make the best product decisions. Just as a side, we do find that although anybody really can use ProdPad, the customers that seem to be the most successful are the ones that are using the Atlassian suite. So they're using Jira, or they're using Trello, they're using Confluence, they may be getting caught up with way too much information being put in way too early in the process in Jira. And as well, if they're really trying to engage all the people around them, as Janna mentioned, having those strong links with their communication tools, particularly Slack, is something that's a real strength for ProdPad. So if you know of customers or of companies that you're working with who are who are maybe fitting this profile that you see here, they're going to be a great fit for ProdPad, and somebody that I think possibly you're going to work better with, as well as we're going to work better with.
Yeah, there's something that I often say about Jira or teams who use the Atlassian suite, but basically anybody who uses Jira probably has problems that ProdPad can help solve, because every Jira tends to get overloaded with a bunch of stuff. It tends to get over-configured, and ProdPad, because we've been working with teams who use Jira for so long, we've got a really, really tight integration. You know, as I said to somebody just yesterday, whatever you've done to your Jira, we've seen worse. We've got all the edge cases worked out. We can work with it, whether it's on the cloud, on the server, on the moon, wherever. We've got it sorted. And likewise with Slack, we've got the tightest integration with Slack that's on the market, certainly, and allows you to do some really, really powerful things, including allowing the whole team to allowing the whole team to log in with Slack, allowing you to use it for community management type stuff, so gathering stuff from your feed from your customers, but mostly for we see it used with your team, right? So if you're using it within your team, conversations are happening. You can turn messages into an idea, and you can have conversations in Slack threads, and they get turned into ProdPad threads, or vice versa, which is great.
It's interesting, but I don't know if you were going to say, Bernard just commented, Jira is a dev task management tool, not idea management. And yes. Amen to that.
Well, that is exactly the problem. And that's where it falls over, because it ends up being used for everything. Us product managers end up just having to use the tools that are adjacent to us. You know, it's like, well, you know, the devs have a tool and you're like a dev, so why don't you use the dev tools? We're like, well, we're not, right? We're actually doing a completely different service. We're discovering and making sure that the developers aren't spending the time building the wrong thing, and using a task manager, a development task manager, isn't going to solve that problem. You know, that's where we were 10, 15 years ago, but this is, you know, 2021. We need our own tools.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I think it's one of the things that we, as a company, I think we're quite strict about, and I know we're strict about it because Janna tells me off all the time, is all the things that we could do with ProdPad that we say no to strategically, because of the fact that we know we're going to be delving closer and closer into that Jira area, that project management area. So knowing where ProdPad stops and where Jira starts, and having that handover from one to the other is, I would say, a strength of ProdPad, because it means we're focusing on solving the problems that product managers have rather than developers have. So while we're talking about focusing on problems, I think the next thing is to say, what can the partner program at ProdPad do for the audience of this webinar? So obviously we're speaking to a bunch of you folks out there who are consultants, who are working with customers and with your own clients and trying to ensure that they're managing the best possible product management practices. And certainly the ProdPad itself and the partner program can help you to achieve that. It's going to help you to instill those best practices. The structure of ProdPad itself means that your customers are going to find it easier to follow those best practices, that you're supporting them as they adopt. And from our perspective, this felt like it would be, a match made in heaven, because we want our ProdPad users to follow best practices. We know you do too. And at the end of the day, the more success that your client has in the way that they implement product management is going to be more success for you, and ultimately more referral business and repeat business for you as consultants. And that was really what drove us to sort of put together the partner program. It's to support the community around us who are product people and help them to do what they need to do with their own clients. As for what it means for you as individuals or as businesses, yay, good news, you get a free ProdPad account. And if there are people on this call who haven't got that yet and haven't signed up for the program yet, then obviously get in touch and we'll make sure that you've got that free account. It also means that anybody that you introduce to ProdPad who then goes to sign up as a result of that introduction, it earns you a 10% referral bonus in whatever they spend in that first year. year. So if they're subscribing to one of our plans, 10% of the revenue that we get from that will be coming your way. So obviously that's yet another good reason to introduce them to us. We will of course support you, provide you with materials, workbooks, white papers, case studies, you know, all of the great stuff that we've already got out there to help people understand what ProdPad's really about. And that's all available for you to use yourself. And of course, you know, we can always introduce them to looking at the ProdPad sandbox as well, which you can find on our website, so they can play around with it before they even start their free trial. Of course, we're all about community. Those of you who already know Janna know that community is a big part of her life even before ProdPad. And so for ProdPad as a business, we see community as being really important. So not only do we see you as a community, you know, within, you know, of people that we want to work with, we also want to make sure that you've got access to the community that we're building up around us to help you build those links and that network. And of course, we'd love for you to be branded as a ProdPad approved partner. In fact, if we flick on to the next slide, it's a bit bright and colourful, this one. But yeah, we can make sure we provide you with some assets to put on your website to make sure that you're able to make it clear that you're working with ProdPad. And if we can go to the next slide after that as well, and this is a bit of a moving around one, so, you know, hold on to your breath. But we're going to put you on our website. We're going to make sure that people know when they come to the ProdPad website that we work with the best people in the community, and we're going to make sure we know who those people are. In fact, some of the names that you see on here are people who've already signed up into the program. This is, as you can see, a prototype that we're showing you right now, but it should be going live pretty soon, so that we can make sure people are going to find you and get more business as a result of them knowing about ProdPad. So just to finish off then, the last slide from me is just to sort of say, if you've not already joined up with us, please do that. If you go to the ProdPad website, underneath that pricing section, you'll notice there's a link to the consultants page. There's a form there for you to fill in, and we'd love to know more about you and understand who you are and what your specialty is, so that we can make sure that people who find you on our website also know what your specialty is and the kind of things that you can help them with. But also make sure that we can get you linked up and get you all the information that you need to get going with the partner program. Yeah, we'll be working together and helping people be better product managers before we know it. And with that, I'll open up and see if there's any more questions from anybody other than the ones we've kind of fielded as we've gone through. I know you've all been quite good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for presenting all that, Liz. Really good to have you share that. Anybody have any questions or anything like that that they'd like to cover?
I think as well, there's a bunch of you already in the ProdPad Talk community, and I know we can DM through there. You can always drop an email to Janna or to myself or to our support desk, hello@prodpad.com, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody's got. Yeah. And with that, I think we'll leave you to it.
Great. So Darwin has asked a question about the Teams and Azure DevOps, because his current client uses Teams and Azure DevOps. So really good questions. How stable are the integrations there? Liz, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Azure DevOps is one of our integrations. It works exactly the same way as the Jira integrations that we've already talked about, in that you push over to DevOps. You will create the tickets in DevOps and map the data appropriately to make sure you're keeping up to date with statuses. So yeah, really great. We have a lot of customers who are using DevOps. And of course, we know that these are Microsoft shops, so Teams is in there as well. I would say our integration with Slack is closer than our integration with Teams, but we have got ways of linking up with Teams using either our API or using Zapier, or embedding some of the things that we have, like the roadmap and the feedback portal in there. Something I'll include as follow-up, I think it looks like it was Darwin actually. I'll include in a follow-up to you, Darwin, or maybe the whole group, some of the links that we have on our help center around Teams, and that'll certainly help there as well.
Yeah, thing that's worth pointing out is that we do have a really detailed help center that covers everything from, what is product management and how does ProdPad detailed step-by-step guides on how to set up every integration, including with third-party integrations like Zapier type things with how to use it with Salesforce, how to use it with Intercom and Zendesk and Teams and a bunch of other things. So we've kind of found all the common integration points and written guides on all these things. So you've got a lot of guidance there.
I can also see a question from Darwin, a niche question. We love a niche question. Do you have any UK government clients? Now, obviously, we have to be really careful who we talk about clients-wise, but we do have clients that we work with in the UK government. One of the things that we haven't talked about in the demo here is the ability to mark different levels of data as different classifications. We've seen that being a need for some clients. So that might be something we follow up with as an individual conversation, Darwin, but it sounds like something we could probably support for you.
Yeah. So Darwin, we are familiar with the official sensitive classifications and have a purpose-built module for that specifically.
It's also worth noting that we're approved in the UK government's G-Cloud scheme, which allows all the government teams to purchase software and various other services. So we're listed in that, which is probably why we do have a number of UK government clients. Yeah.
And for your more security conscious customers, we do have extensive security documents. And for the most security conscious clients, we do have an on-premise version of ProdPad that can be made available as part of our enterprise plan.
Any more questions from anybody before we leave you to it and maybe follow up with some useful info for you? If not, I think maybe we're done for today, Janna. But thank you so much for the demo that you did for me, so that I could take a breather on this very warm day. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch with folks on this call and the people who are following up to watch on video later on as well.
Right, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you for your questions and your time today. Hope you all have a wonderful day and have a great evening. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Bye-bye.